Hello, everybody. It's Adelaja here. This program has not come on for some time because I was traveling and a lot of things have taken place here since the last time we met. But there is a certain Ben Okoh that is used to picking my mind and methods. He's curious about why I do what I do and he wants to get to the bottom of it all. Well, he is the host and the anchor of this program, and he's back to us after about 2 or 3 months that we last held a program. Hello, sir. The ball is on your court. You can anchor the program as you know to do best. This is Ben Okoh. Let's welcome him and greet him, everybody.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Such a pleasure being with you again on Mind and Methods of DSA. We've had other programs we've explored, and the most memorable one about your 300-year plan and why you have to have a 300-year plan. On my mind, really, it's quite amazing to see that level of vision, and also particularly that you are actually doing something about the vision. So there's one thing to say you see a vision, and another to actually see that you're doing something about that vision. And that's what I find particularly impressive. So it's such a pleasure again to have to speak with you and to speak and discuss on your thoughts. And today, actually, the topic I chose was the time for war. And I think there's a part of all of us. I won't want to say all of it because some of it I want to know your own original thoughts about it. But I think it's the easiest part about going forward anywhere is the dreaming part of it, in terms of to hope for something. Because you are someone who's a pastor, so you've come from biblical background. So if I use the look at the example of Israelites, I think you know that very well, that it was a land of milk and honey. So when you say milk and honey, that looks like, whoa, something exciting. But there appears to be a second half of the dream where you start to have things to do with conflict. And I think the conflicts are so multifaceted in different sort of areas, even, which I hope we will discuss and explore, and want to know what you think about it. And while I was thinking about, immediately you are setting your mind to any aspirational thing you want to do, or you have something you want to do. And the phase of excitement about this phase of that phases, immediately that goes, then you start to confront things. It's sometimes what you don't even see. So sometimes it could be fear. It could be just so many things start coming. Reality of the situation, your lack of understanding of your lack of resources. There's so many things, but I don't want to give initially that what exactly or which direction. I want it to really be open to discussion. But the first one, what took me from there was the passage in, I think it's Ecclesiastes that said, to everything there's a season. And there's one part where it particularly says a time to tear, a time to mend, time to be silent, time to speak. Then it also talks about a time for war and a time for peace. And I thought, well, if you say a time to be born and a time to die, that one, it makes sense, right? Because you're born, you don't choose your birth. And most of the time, they choose it all the time, except those who decide to end it themselves. But you don't necessarily, those two are things that happen in nature. But when it comes to peace and war, they happen to be things that are man, or they are made by, we actually make it what it is in terms of the concept of war or peace is collectively a human construct. So I wanted to say, why a time for war? Why will that be there, a time for war? What does that mean? Why is it there in terms of the concept of a time for war?
Yeah, well, that is a very, very great philosophical concept idea. And it's a pity that we Christians and human beings in general, we try to neglect that truth. And even when we read that scripture, we don't seem to understand the great wisdom that God is communicating to us through that place. So when when that scripture says a time for war and a time for peace, it also means that in life you would not have it only your ways. In life you will have sometimes when things will be going on smoothly, like peaceful times and peaceful seasons. But there are other times also where you should be prepared for rough times, that there will be rough times, times for war and for conflict, and that, both of them should be regarded as normal. It's just like saying that, but in real life, with us human, we would rather prefer to have times of peace all the time. We want things to be okay. We want things to be smooth and nice. We want things to be, to just be under control. That is what we desire. That's what we want. We always want things to be our own way. That's why we run away from problems. That's why we run away from challenges. That's why we run away from crises. But really, what that scripture is trying to tell us is that no, sometimes you need to be ready for war and for crisis and for challenges. And if you look at this book here, that's exactly what it portrays. I call it the Elijah challenge because I was challenging and throwing a challenge to the leadership of the church in Nigeria. And that's a time for war idea. But to a lot of people who are even my colleagues in the ministry, they think this is weird and this is crazy. How could you declare war on people, who are supposed to be this and that? But you see, that is exactly what we are talking about. You must know there are times to make peace, but there are also times to, to face challenges and to confront. There are times for confrontation. Same thing, but same thing when it comes to national development and change. If you need change, then you must be ready for war. Changes don't come on a platter of gold. They come as a result of some challenge and crisis and war and battles. So that is exactly what he's trying to say. That don't expect that things will just be running smoothly in your life, but always be psychologically prepared for other times when you will need to fight for what you desire, or you will need to first go to battles for what you want, or when you yourself would have to be the one to declare the war. Are you hearing me?
Clearly.
Sorry?
I can hear you.
Okay, come again, please.
Clearly. Because you can, from what you're stating, it's like chaos, like war relates to chaos. And peace is usually related with order. So that's why when you say, oh, this is a time for war, like the Elijah challenge, you've given an example of, it's literally a declaration of war, really, against probably an ideal.
Peace doesn't normally mean order. I would say peace, in my own understanding, we sometimes could be order, but not necessarily order. Peace most of the time is serenity rather than order.
Oh, and serenity is not order?
Serenity is not order, yes.
So what is serenity?
Serenity is a state of rest.
Oh.
And a state of peace.
So a state of rest is serenity.
Yes.
Okay, and that's not necessarily order.
That is not necessarily order.
So therefore you can have order in serenity and order in chaos.
You could have disorder in time of serenity.
Can you give an example of where you have disorder in serenity?
Okay, like for example, in your house, you might not be fighting with anybody.
Yep.
You might be living alone. You have a lot of serenity, but if you look around there, it could be full of disorder. So also in a country, there are countries where there are no wars going on, but then you see that, okay, no war, but there is no order. And most of those countries that are developing countries, they don't have wars, they don't have some conflict going on, but they lack development because of lack of order. So order is different from serenity.
So for the Elijah challenge, are you therefore bringing, because that's the example you gave, are you therefore bringing an antonym or an opposite of serenity to the situation? Is it
for
a
the
way of
no? Before we could address that, you made two statements. One of them said, war. I mean, a state of peace is a state of. I mean, what do I say? Can you remind me of those?
peace relating to order?
Peace. Okay, that's to say peace is equal to order, and
Yes.
what?
And chaos.
War equals to chaos. Well, I would not really, yes, which is, that second one is more truth. War relates to chaos. But there are different kinds of wars. War could have chaos in itself, but I would not say war is always chaos. I would rather say war is more relating to conflict than chaos.
Okay. So war relating to conflict.
Rather than chaos.
Okay. So if we bring it back to where, we said earlier, therefore, if war is necessary conflict, you're saying that by nature, we should expect that conflict is part of our daily lives.
Yes.
Because the idea of war.
Because if you now say the idea of war is always chaos, that is like saying we should always expect chaos. No. Order is what we look forward to. But conflict should be the regular rather than chaos.
Okay. So in conflicts, for example, you could have a battle, like a battle.
Yes.
And that is conflict. So
yes.
You have a battle.
Yes.
But a war would involve so many battles.
Yes.
So suggesting that in life, it is constant conflict.
Yes. And that's what we should expect. And that's what we should look forward to. Conflict could be conflicts and there will be different kind of conflicts and wars. So when it says there's a time for war and a time for peace, it means there are some times when, most of the time, wars are not expected by you. Sometimes wars are what are brought to your doorsteps. So somebody else is imposing war against you or initiating war against you. But also, you must also realize that because of life and the way it is made up, sometimes you will have to be the one to initiate the war.
Okay. I think that's sort of uncomfortable for many.
Yes.
Because some people...
and that's why we run away from problems and crises and conflicts and confrontations and challenges.
Yes. But what would you say if someone says, I'm a man of peace? So they are people
beautiful. But you must also know that some peace are not possible until there is a conflict. And of course, in most of the conflicts and wars, there will be chaos. It's just like saying you want to, let's take the example of you wanting to do a renovation or a complete makeover of your house or your apartment. In that kind of situation, there will be conflict, there will be war. And in that kind of renovation and a total makeover, there will be a mess. And there will be a chaos. But the chaos that we are talking about in that sense is a planned chaos. It's a planned conflict. It's such a chaos and conflict that is regulated and directed to bring about a better future, a better order. So if somebody says, I'm a person of peace, that means I'm a person of order, I'm a person of serenity. But for you to maintain peace sometimes, there might be a need for war. For you to maintain peace at times, you might need to enter into some conflicts too. For you to maintain peace, sometimes there might be need to initiate some confrontations and controversies.
Okay. So when it comes to the concept of war, is it therefore a human thing? Is it a human, something that is human, always involves human involvement, really?
War is, because of the destructions of war, and because of what we understand by war, which always relates to bringing about death, destruction of human lives. That's why we tend to hate war, fight against war, and discourage war. So I would not say it is natural or human to be involved in war, but conflict is what I would rather say. It is natural and it is human to have conflicts, controversies, and conflicts and controversies. And yes, if you want to use that as war, then in that sense, yes.
But prolonged conflict can create anxiety, isn't
Definitely.
it? And isn't anxiety a natural way of dealing with what shouldn't be? So, in which case, are we attuned or adapted to conflict? Is conflict not something that is not meant to be always there? In which
Yes.
case, you shouldn't always be being a state of
Absolutely. The conflict, a state of war, conflict, and controversy is not a regular state. It shouldn't be a constant condition. It's something that is necessary at a particular time to give room to a more peaceful, serene reality.
Okay. So I want to discuss more about human nature, because here where humans tend to be the ones who are conflicted, probably the ones who are intelligent enough to decide that they want to impose a superior order and therefore go into conflict for it. What is your understanding? What do you think of human nature? Of the human nature? Because you have worked with people from all sorts of places. Also, now that you've even started working with probably Africans as well through your project for Africa, you've now exposed to a new set of human behavior. What can you say about the human nature?
Human nature is very complex, but it's mainly dual.
Okay.
The dual nature of man will be the good and the bad.
Good and bad. So
Yes.
everybody is good and bad.
Yes. In every one of us, we have both good and evil.
And what makes good and what makes evil? What constitutes good and what
Well,
constitutes evil?
the good in man is the very nature that God put in him. That's why God stands for good and Satan stands for evil. God stands for light, Satan stands for darkness. And the two nature, the two reality is what is in us. But we never saw the evil side of man in human until man fell into sin. So which
Yeah.
means the original nature of man was good, because the whole time man was alive and man was existing with before the fall, we didn't see any form of evil at all in man. So man was what the original nature of man was is good. That original nature remains in the man even after he fell into sin and after evil was introduced to him. So despite the presence of evil in man, man still remains inherently good. So no matter how bad a person or how evil a person is, let's say you found somebody who is a maniac or who is a pedophile or who is whatever, any kind of sin you could imagine, who commits any kind of sin you could imagine, that person has some bit of good in him. And at the root of that person, at the core of that person, if you keep on investigating that person down to the core of himself, you will discover that that person is an inherently good person. So if you bring me the wicked or the baddest criminal in the UK today, and I will tell you that, well, the only thing I will need to do with him is to keep on removing all the layers of evil that are upon him, that are on him. You know, it's like you have a piece of gold inside, and then you put which is just maybe 1 gram of gold, but then you put a whole bunch of dirt on top of it because of what he has collected over the years of his existence. So maybe now it's weighing 100 kilograms. But if you keep on removing layer by layer, all those top layers of evil that you see, because those are the visible part of things of him that you have seen, you keep on removing them upon layer, the visible evil, and then you keep on working upon it, you keep on digging deep into him, you discover that at the core, that 100 gram or so, that is at his core is good. So there is good in every man. And if we will stay long enough with them and walk long enough on them and refine them as much as we could and love them enough and show them enough the original image of who they were supposed to be, if we show them the prototype of themselves, if we show them the mirror enough, long enough, they will discover themselves. It's just like somebody who has never seen the mirror. Even the first time he sees the mirror, he will not believe he's the one, because he's never seen himself before. But if you keep that mirror before his face long enough, he will discover who he looks like and who he is. If we will keep the nature of God on before man for as long as possible, we will succeed in removing the evil layers upon them, and then we will be able to bring them to a place where they will discover their original self, which is good actually. That's why we don't hate people. That's why God said, love and do not hate, bless and do not curse. So we see the evil that people do, and we don't live in denial that they are doing that evil. We do acknowledge the evil that they do, but we take our time to remove the layers of those evil and stick with them for long enough until they look at the mirror and see the original image that's supposed to be. And that original image is the image of God, which is always good and only good.
Wow. I think what you're saying is that if I got it rightly, is that the enlightenment is what is the good. But whatever is good is whatever enlightenment you have of your true nature. And in this,
yeah,
yes, so your true nature, the enlightenment you get from your true nature is what is the good part. And darkness is probably the ignorance. Because in this example where you're saying you have to stay long enough to show someone the prototype of themselves, it's a form of education, I think, for people to deeply understand themselves and who they truly are. And then they start acting or behaving out of that position of enlightenment. Is that?
That's a very beautiful word you use, enlightenment. Enlightenment, or yeah, that's a very good word. Is enlightenment, a revelation? Yeah, that is a very, very good word. Enlightenment, education, information, knowledge, understanding, wisdom. All that help you to get back to your core.
I see. So in what you're doing now, particularly your work in Africa, is therefore conflict to raise enlightenment.
Yes, that is the kind of war we are talking about. But it's not a war of killing people. It's a war of light and darkness. And there is a time to do that. There is a time to go into conflict intentionally, knowingly raise confrontation and raise a controversy so that people will become aware of that which they had not been aware of. And so that people will be steered away from their usual state, things that they are already used to, thinking it is normal. But you need to steer them, challenge them to begin to see differently.
I see. Okay. I was reflecting on it before today, and I thought about, this human nature. We're talking about human nature, which I'll also say, traits, human traits or characteristics of people that is probably common to people. And I also thought about how that influences, because you earlier stated that sometimes war is brought to you. So the concept is conflict will be brought toward, and sometimes you have to go out and put the conflict there. You have to be the one constructing conflict. But I think every day, conflict could come your way. And I think I'd heard someone say this somewhere, that humans are probably the most dangerous species out there. Because if you saw a lion, at least you know what it's going to do. You have an idea of what it's going to do. You know what is typical of it. But humans are intelligent, so are more complex, and they have the ability to cover up and pretend. And there's so many skills that they also have there. And I was thinking in that respect, and I thought, okay, these are I wrote a few notes and reasons why these human traits actually relate to conflicts, to the conflicts that they do. And I just wanted to see what things about these ideas I want to state out, and probably hear some more of what you think could be the reasons for war that are related to those traits. And I'll give an example, for example, in families where parents are having conflict with their children, or couples, married people are having conflict among themselves, and it's a perpetual war, or where there's even conflict between, like in your case, your ideology and, of the kingdom, and what is the ideology currently standing in the whole nation state in Nigeria, for example, or in Africa generally. And I thought that sometimes war could be a manifestation of either battles or restlessness. And when people are nihilistic, so they feel hopeless, and when they feel depressed, and they feel suicidal. Now, when people are like that, when they hate life maybe, or they don't like people, and then suddenly they get into power or they get control of power, then they are likely to bring war, in terms of they are likely to bring conflict, because they hate everything anyway. So they will just organize their power, organize resources to do that. How much is that a sensible thought, or what thoughts do you have about that as reasons for conflict?
Yes, definitely. That is most of the time what people do is a reflection of what is going on within them. So most people who will be conflicting or be antagonistic will probably be like that because of the antagonism they already have inside. And most of them would be like that because of the failure of themselves, to themselves. And that is just what is being manifested publicly. But then at a time like that, other people too who don't have that conflict or that failure, that inner failure, but who are witnesses of the evil that their state could cause, might need to start a war to limit their damage and their destruction. So if I see a Hitler that is devastating and that is, that is killing and destroying annihilating, or what do you call it, the people around me, and doing evil, just spreading evil, and I am somebody that is seeing all that devastation, and even though I don't have any tendency to evil or conflict within me, but because I am human and I'm seeing this evil spreading, and if I'm not careful, the evil will overtake us and we'll get to where I am. Even if we don't get to where I am, but it's devastating other people. So I might need to raise a coalition of, or just raise an army, or raise a conflict, or raise a war battle or a war cry to go and confront that evil that I'm seeing that is devastating the whole place and start a war against it.
So in response to that sort of war they bring in, you have to raise just to limit.
Even if it's not, they might not bring war, but if I see the tendencies or the possibility of evil, then I might start a war as a preemptive war or preemptive attack, preemptive assault, preemptive confrontation. To, what is it, nip in the knob? Or what do you call it? What is the state?
Yes, nip, is it nip in the bud?
Yeah, nip in the bud. Yes, yeah. So nip in the bud, the rising evil.
So that conflict, interesting. Another one I had was, I thought this was another idea that came to me, that sometimes conflict comes as a form of professional development. I feel like some people are trying to test their resources, or they're trying to test their strategies or their ideologies, and therefore they create conflicts just to test and run out ideas to develop themselves, or to as a way of developing or improving themselves or testing out ideas on others. Is that something you recognize?
Yes.
Is that something you do yourself?
Is that something that I do?
Yes.
Not as much, but I might be doing that. I might need to do that also sometimes, but not necessarily, because I'm operating from another ideological point of view, which is the concept of the kingdom of God. And so I am limited in my methods. Otherwise, it's an understandable approach that that I know that could be tolerated, could be used by other people.
Oh, so you say you're limited by the because you adopt a kingdom approach, so it limits what you do or what ways you actually go into conflict.
Yes.
Okay, so what are those parameters for engagement, or what is it that's actually defining what you can do or can't do? Because in that concept of self-development, I know that lots of people you've on your show have had places where you criticize, for example, people who use some books or methods of there's some probably I would say business books, but professional books. I can't remember the name of this
48
one.
Laws of...
Yes, 48 Laws of Power, for example. People use those things as ways of, like you read something like that and put it out there. And so every time we step out, you will be meeting people, organizations, systems that are built on and therefore you are literally in conflict with things that are built on tested and tried methods.
Yes.
And principles.
But I cannot use some methods because I represent another kingdom. I have to be aware all the time that expediency is not always the motivation for my actions. Expediency, as good as that is, or the desire to have results, no matter how good that looks, that shouldn't be the motivation for somebody who represents the kingdom of God. So for me, as a representative of the kingdom of God, I, first of all, want to use methods that are in line with the rules of engagement of my kingdom, of my homeland, and of my master. So what with those rules of engagement are? Number one would be love. So anything that I do, we have to be motivated by love, not by just to experiment and to see that it brings results. No, that is secondary. And that might not even apply most of the time, especially if it comes in conflict with the overall guiding rule of love. So love is a motivating factor. It's a major one in this kingdom. The next one, the next rule of engagement as a kingdom person for me is that human life is supreme. God gave his own life to redeem human life. So we do things that are redemptive in nature rather than destructive in nature. So we are always trying to be redemptive in our approach. Then the next principle that I want to say is a rule of engagement here is that we only do things that are already allowed in heaven. Thy will be done in heaven, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So that is a rule of engagement for us. We must make sure that we are acting in line with how God himself would have acted. We are acting in accordance to his behavior pattern, his method of doing things, and in agreement with what is already obtainable in the homeland, in the kingdom of heaven. So those are basically the main rules that we must always bear in mind.
Okay, so you said you're not interested. You don't look out for the results. So therefore,
No, I do. We do look out for results, but it must not conflict those three things that were mentioned.
So love, supreme human life, or the supremacy of the human life in terms of value of the human, redemptive there, and then if it's allowed in heaven. Yes. And what do you mean by allowed in heaven?
It has to be something that is already obtained, that is practiced or obtainable in the kingdom of God. So it has to be things that we see as a method or principle that God himself applies. Basically being a copycat of God.
So you are therefore assuming that everything that you can observe in terms of that you observe as a pattern or a value of God, you replicate.
Yes, that is the goal. That is the ultimate motivation for all actions, and that is what we call truth.
And is that related to enlightenment?
All enlightenment must come from that perspective. All enlightenment must be based on the truth. And the truth is only a reflection of him. And, so once enlightenments are based on that, then we are walking in the light.
Okay. Then how do you relate that with something I know you have raised before? Because I know this is something that's very popular in Africa mostly, and because that's where you're doing a lot of your work. What would you say about where the idea that when people hear about warfare, it's usually a spiritual concept of warfare, involves lots of praying, or even aggressive ways of praying, cursing, spiritual things that are not physically tangible. And that's the idea, because you appear to be emphasizing knowledge of truth and application of those truth principles. And I know you've done that before, where there was one you were talking about. I think because we've been following you for a long time, I remember someone had threatened you, or they sent a recording and you tried to use it as an example. And you said you were not even going to pray about it. You're not even going to do anything about it. It appears you were trying to apply some form of principle to it. Or is it the same? Can I say that that's what you're trying to explain? Or is that a good example of what you're trying to express?
A good example of what?
Of the use of truth or an enlightened position to deal with any type of conflict, even if it's non-natural or if it's internal or individual internal things like fear or those type of nature things. That it's the use of truth, an enlightened position of truth, which is your image in God's likeness. I'll use that in quotes, and using that as your way to go through conflict or to survive or thrive in the midst of conflicts, whatever they come.
Yes, there is. Truth is the foundation. Is the foundational weaponry in any spiritual warfare. That is why when you look at Ephesians chapter 6, it's talking about taking up your guard of truth, or your belt of truth. Is it the belt of truth?
I think it's belt.
Belt of truth. And the reason for belt of truth or guard of truth is because all other weapons that you are wearing on yourself are held together by that belt of truth. So once the belt of truth is loosed or removed, all other weapons fall down helpless and they become useless. So truth is the foundational weapon. So for example, if somebody says, like for example, right now, some people told me they were going to do this and that to me. So I just say, okay, I know a superior truth, and thanks to the superior truth that I know, for example, the truth that I know is I am hidden in Christ. And this is not just something I know in my head. This is something I know as a fact. So once I know I'm hidden in Christ, I know you do anything you want to do. Before you get to me, you will have to pass through Christ. That's one truth right there, for example. Another one could be the fact that my cause is right. And I am pursuing a right and a just cause, which is based on instruction. I know that the Lord has instructed me to do this. So even whatever might be the consequence is not material to me. I might even die in the process. But death is inferior to the knowledge that I have that I am doing God's will. Once I know I'm doing God's will and I die in the process, the knowledge of the truth that it is God's will that I'm doing is stronger than the consequence of whatever I've done. Is stronger than the death that will come, because that death that will come is not as powerful. It's just a consequence. But whatever is the consequence of the truth, of the right thing that I do, of the actions that I did according to truth, is inconsequential. What is the real thing is that I'm acting according to the truth. So that's why I will not bother to pray and to worry and bother myself about the concerns of people who want to harm me.
Now, you talk about differentiated knowing the truth in the head and knowing as fact. How do you differentiate the two? That would be the first thing I would ask.
Yes, for example, I could know that the Bible says, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. That's what I know in the head. I know it in the head as the truth of the Word of God. But it is not going to be my truth when I go to maybe I go to confront Syrian terrorists. When nobody is sending me there, God is not sending me to them. I don't have any leading or any instruction to go to them. But I just say, no weapon formed against me shall prosper, so I'm going to fight all these Islamic terrorists and stop them. But if I now get an instruction additionally that activates that fact, or that gives me a basis to take the action that I'm taking, that, okay, go and confront those terrorists in Syria right now, and I send you, I go before you, that now makes me to rest upon that promise that no weapon formed against me shall prosper, because I've been sent on this assignment.
So therefore, truth needs to sort of be situational. So it has to be related to a situation, like a specific. You can't generalize some truth and say, okay, this is what I know.
No, it doesn't have to be. It's not just about situation. I just use that situation. I could use other examples. For example, it could be something different than that. It doesn't have to just be situational. Truth has to be personal, I would rather say, rather than situational. It has to be personified. It has to be something that is quickened in me, that is activated in my subconsciousness, that I'm acting on. It has to be the truth that is. For example, the Bible says that love is not easily provoked. Even though I know that in my head, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be provoked when things happen. But if I study that word and I imbibe it in myself through meditation, and it has become part and parcel of me, then it is my own, it is activated. It's just like saying you have a battery, and that battery is not charged. Even though you try to use it, it's not going to work. So what I'm trying to say is that it must be charged. Either it's charged by an instruction, or it's charged by you being conscious of it, or it's charged by you imbibing it into yourself. It must be something that you are actively, consciously aware of and living by.
Okay, so I think I understand that. This is why you suggest that when you have books, if people take up your books to read, that they should spend a lot of time making it part of them, like embedding it in themselves.
Not just books, but even with what we are doing right now, like we are talking right now, I have a lot of videos and interviews and messages. People can just listen, but doesn't mean that they got anything from it. For the truth that they are receiving and hearing to help them, it's not just enough for them to know it in their head. They must really take the time to make that truth, because the truth they are hearing is a spiritual substance. It's not enough for you to just hear it. You must make that spiritual substance become flesh. It must become your substance. It's not just, spiritual substance is something in the air, somewhere there. So if you hear it, it comes out the other ear. You just hear in the air, in the atmosphere. But if you want it to become part and parcel of your life and for it to work for you, it must be converted from the atmosphere into your physical material body. It's just like saying, for example, there is vapor, in the atmosphere. So I must be able to find a conditioner or a fridge or refrigerator to condense that vapor into ice. But the condensing of it is slowing down the energy. And when that energy is slowed down, then the vapor that I don't see actually in the natural with my eyes becomes visible, because it has been so slowed down that I can now see it as an ice block. Same thing with any spiritual energy. Any spiritual energy is like invisible energy, is a lot, is all out there, is just something in the air. That air has to be slowed down, because I am physical. And anything that must help me must be able to live in my physical body. And for it to live in my physical body, it must be slowed down to become tangible, because I am tangible myself. Just like that vapor is slowed down to become water or to become ice is physical. Then I could hold it now that is ice. I could hold it now, I could carry it. So also any truth of God or any truth out there must be condensed and slowed down to become tangible in me. Then it works.
So therefore, I think there's this definition of what spiritual is, therefore, because there's a lot you're saying here. You said truth as a spiritual substance. So is it like a resource, an unseen, invisible resource? Is that what you could therefore describe as spiritual?
Yes. Spiritual is not just resource. Yeah, truth is a resource. Spiritual resource. You could call it resource if you want.
Okay. And so therefore, what is spiritual warfare? What's that concept? What does that mean?
I guess spiritual warfare, what people talk about spiritual warfare, they're trying to, what it's supposed to refer to is the reality of good and evil. Just like there is what I said now about truth, which is the truth and of God or the resource of God, there is also the opposite of that, which is lie or which is deception, which is the weapon that Satan uses. So other people also, so spiritual warfare is when there is a conflict between the good and the evil, or darkness and light. So spiritual warfare is not just the way people do it in church by just praying and shouting, and that could be it, or it could also involve that, but it goes beyond that.
Okay. So it goes beyond that to what?
To all that is good and evil, and all that is truth and deception.
I've often
Light
seen
and darkness.
Yes. Okay. I've often seen challenges, especially when I used to be on social media a lot, because I've reduced that now to really spend more time studying and trying to understand so many things. But I remember then, I usually used to commonly see a lot of challenges to some of the things you put out there, and some people challenge you with the idea that how do you know that you're right, or are you the only one that knows what is right, or which is the truth that they're actually challenging, or why is your version of the truth the right thing? What is the authority, or how do you differentiate between the truth? Because if you take any type of topic and talk about truth, I would expect that if it's a physical one, if it's a physical law, there is actually an ultimate truth. For example, the truth was the earth is flat. Then we realized that no, the world is actually not flat, because new knowledge came in. So therefore, I'm thinking, how do you actually ascertain what your truth is, and that the truth you state, the originality or the credence to your own truth? How do you establish that? The truth, yes, the truth, which you state, but many people challenge that and say, okay, you are saying this is what your view is about this, but we don't agree with it. So how do you, when you have so many people coming with many ideas of what truth is, how do you decipher what is truth and what is not truth, and what should be enlightened? It's very critical from what you've described so far.
Wow. The question you are asking sounds so it sounds so innocent and so what do you call it, so simple. Yeah, I think that's what I would like to say. That sounds very simple, right? And it's very straightforward what you are saying right now. And everybody that is listening to you might say, yeah, he said it. Yeah, he just said it. It's true. How do you know if what you are saying is the truth or it's not the truth? Yeah, he's right. And they think it's so easy to answer like that. But really, it's easy to answer, but it's a very complex answer. So I want to know if it is something that you are ready to deal with right now or not, because it's going to be much more complex than what you are ready for. I think.
I think you
Because
should at least put.
it's going to go a long way, or it's going to take us a long way from where or from where the topic we are in right now. But if you want us to address it, we are going to address it. I've got to take my note for this.
Okay. I think it's
Yes.
important to address it because from what the way the discussion we've had has gone, it appears that this is the central meaning and reason or what legitimizes anything or your even engagement with conflict, including conflict that comes to you. Because you started that conflict could be conflict that others bring to you, conflict that you have to institute, but all of those are based on principle and understanding of truth. So if that's the case, therefore, the concept of even conflict in self-defense or engagement needs to be on the basis of that definition of what truth is.
Okay.
That's what I kind of got from
If
what you said so far.
if you are ready to smell the coffee, then let's go to the kitchen.
Okay. All right. I don't know if I'm ready, but yes, let's give it a go.
Okay.
I want to hear.
So what is truth? How do you know if something is truth or not? And when I challenge people in Africa about their doctrines and practices,
Yeah.
I am coming from an informed position on the subject of truth. But in most cases, the people that are challenging me and are trying to respond to me don't even have an idea of what truth is. But they are just being emotional and sentimental. But let me give you the basis for truth, universal truth, which cannot be disputed by anybody, because okay, let me just start. For anything to be truth, it has to be universal. So what does that mean? Truth, anything that we call truth, has to be something that is true or truth for all peoples, in all places, and in all times. For example, the law of gravity is absolute. Mathematics, 1 plus 1 is truth everywhere. Physics, biology are examples of absolute truth. So different cultures, different historical eras, different nationalities cannot and do not change what truth is. For example, there was a time when people used to believe that blacks are inferior to white people. Why is it that it doesn't hold water anymore? It doesn't hold water any longer? Well, before I continue, Ben, it's like you need to add some light to where you are. It's becoming darker and darker. So while I'm giving my answer, go look for your light.
The light is actually on, but I don't know. I'll just close the window. I don't know if that.
Yeah, well, do something while I'm going on. I don't know. I don't care what we do, but let me just keep on going to do what I need to do. So
Okay.
blacks are inferior is long gone. Why is it I cannot hold water any longer? It's very simple, because it's not truth anyway all along. There is another concept that is also long gone, which is people say women are second-class citizens. It's all gone now too, because it cannot hold water for long. And that is why I believe that Islam, for example, is going to collapse. Because a system that is making women or other people to look somehow is not going to last for so long. Because truth must be sustainable in every situation. And it will be sustainable for as long as possible. So when Islam is putting women in bondage and not allowing for competition, it will not last. I'm sorry I have to use that example, but that just... So truth, for example, will be pregnancy. When you look at pregnancy, People get pregnant for 9 months. It's the standard truth everywhere. When a child grows up at 3 months or so, it begins to crawl, or by 9 months the teeth begin to grow. The same truth in every culture. Culture, nature don't change that. I could keep on talking about that, but that's just one standard for truth. Truth must be universal. Now, everything I've said now, people will think that they got me and they understand. I'm not sure, but they will still need to go and listen to this again. If you listen to this again, you will be able to get, I will not repeat myself. I will just go point by point. So, for anything to be truth, it must be universal, which I have already explained. Number two, for anything to be truth, it has to be absolute. Truth cannot be truth and still be relative. So if anything is relative, it's not truth. For it to be truth, it has to be absolute. And absolute is needed for standards. Because if there are no absolutes, then there will be no standards. If there are no standards, then there are no rules. There are no borders. There are no boundaries. There are no limits. There is nothing that we base our decisions on. Standard. That's why truth must always be absolute. There cannot be standards without absolutes. Indeed, there cannot be measurement without absolutes. So a builder knows that if he wants a number of pieces of wood, the same exact size, he will use one piece as that standard. So we need a standard, and that is why truth must be absolute. So number one is truth must be universal. Number two is truth must be absolute for it to be truth. Number three, for anything to be truth, that truth has to be objective. So that for anything to be truth, it has to be objective, meaning that it has to be independent of anybody, both the person speaking that truth and the person opposing that truth, or the knower of that truth. So it has to be independent of everybody. You need to consciously take the decision to submit yourself to the truth. And this means that for truth to be objective, truth must be above everybody else. Truth must be above everyone. Truth must be the absolute standard, the highest standard. All of us must submit to that truth. You need to submit yourself to the truth so that if the truth conflicts with your opinion, it is not the truth that bends, it is you who bend. So that when truth conflicts with your emotions, it is not truth that bends, it is you who bends. So that when truth conflicts with your sentiments, it is not truth that is compromised, but your sentiment is what has to go. So truth, therefore, must always be objective. You need to consciously take the decision to submit yourself to the truth each time and every time. It is not based on subjective feelings and personal opinions. It has to be objective, not subjective. Truth does not depend on us or on our opinion. And personal experience is not the basis for truth. And that's what I'm trying to discuss with my people in Africa, and I'm trying to prove to them. Personal experiences cannot be taken as truth. Truth is something that is external, outside, and independent of us. We discover truth that already exists. We don't make it up or create it. And that is what I'm battling with in Africa. So truth has to be objective. So let's go back to the three things I said already. Truth has to be universal. Truth has to be absolute. Truth has to be objective. Next point, if you still, let me give you another one. Truth has to correspond with reality. Truth corresponds with reality. It corresponds to the way things really are. You don't try to make truth work. Truth works all the time. Truth is what corresponds to the actual state of affairs being described. Truth is telling it like it is already. So, let me keep on going. Number 5, truth is based on universality. Truth is based on Let me just say it the way it is. I wanted to use a word that is not religious, but let me just say truth is based on God. Because God is the basis of truth. Only God provides an unchanging, universal reality upon which truth is based. Number 6, truth is personal. What does that mean? Truth is more than just abstract theories and propositions. Truth is something that demands a personal response. That means truth could be applied to you personally. Truth must be something that you are able to practice. And finally, I guess, for something to be truth, it has to be knowable. It has to be something that we could know and we could discover. But if I talk about what truth is and give you the parameters of truth, I will be doing you half justice. Because truth cannot be understood, and you will not be able to know and affirm for sure what truth is if I don't tell you what truth is not. So I've just told you right now what truth is and what is the basis for truth and how should anything be considered truth. But that will be half truth if I don't tell you what truth is not. So let me now tell you what truth is not. Number 1, truth is not what works. The fact that something works, that doesn't make it truth. It has to still be absolute. It has to be universal. It has to have all other 7 criteria that I gave earlier. So the fact that something works and doesn't have those other criteria is not truth. The fact that something works doesn't make it truth. That is very important. Because in my country, where I come from, people assume that once something works, then it is truth. But the truth be told, cheating and lying also works. Armed robbery works. 419 works. But these things don't make them truth. Secondly, what truth is not. Truth is not what feels good. Sin feels good. Because that is what feels good is mysticism. It is subjectivism, but it's not truth. Because subjectivism is what affirms feelings. It is subjectivism that makes you to say, I feel it, I feel it. I know it's true because I feel it. That is subjectivism, but that's not truth. There are a lot of things you feel, but that doesn't make it truth. Because feeling can be misleading. Somebody could feel this way in the same circumstances, another person will feel the very same opposite. So whose feeling are we going to take for the truth? Who decides the truth if you feel this way and I feel the opposite of it? So it is not what feeling is. Feeling cannot make truth. So another thing that is not truth is not whatever you want it to be. All of us don't decide truth. That is called relativism. Relativism says that truth is whatever I declare it to be. But then it's not the truth, because everybody then in the world will have their own truth. If everybody is saying that what I feel or what I say is what is truth, then there will be no life, no standard. The goalposts will always be changing by the person who comes around. Next point, what truth is not. Truth is not just what we perceive with the senses. That what we perceive with our senses is called empiricism. But it is not truth. That is what we perceive by our 5 senses. Truth is more than what we perceive, what we see, what we hear, what we touch. There are a lot of things that we cannot see, touch, or feel, or hear, like beauty, like truth, justice, love, kindness. You cannot always see these things and perceive them by your five senses. So, truth is not subject to our five senses. Next point, truth is not what the majority believe. Majority can be wrong. That is majoritarianism. It says truth is what most people agree upon. No, truth is not democratic. Nobody can vote on the truth. Truth is not democracy. Next point, what truth is not. Truth is not easy way to live. Whatever the easy way is, easy way out. No, that's not truth. But it's the way of life. We don't choose to go the easy way of life. No, it's just the only way to live. Truth is the only way to live. Truth cannot be cheapened. Truth is not cheap. Truth is the way life is meant to function. So I've given you two sides of the truth, how to know what truth is. And I hope you are listening.
Yes, I actually took some notes. And when you talked about I think the third one, which is not what you want it to be, and you talked about relativism.
Yes.
I think I know about that one because it's quite popular in the West.
In the West,
a lot.
Yes.
Because the idea, I think, is postmodernism.
Yes.
That promotes that sort of idea more. But it's the idea that everybody has their own truth.
Yes.
So you can't actually have one truth because everybody has their experience, and their experience defines the truth to them.
Yes.
So if everyone has their own experience and their own truth, you cannot have an absolute truth.
Yes.
In that sense.
Yes.
You're bringing in the argument because one of the things I noticed you said all the time is standard.
Yes.
That you can't have standard.
Yes.
What is the necessity of standard? Because if we have relative truths like what is practiced in the West, it
is not practiced in the West.
Well, I agree with that.
The reason is because the people who are saying they practice relative truth don't really practice relative truth. They don't practice relative truth. There is nothing like relative truth. And even in the West, where they are trying to practice postmodernism, and they tell you about relativity of truth, they don't believe in it, and they don't do it. For example, if it is true that there is relativity of truth, why do they have borders? Why don't they just allow everybody to cross the border to England or to Europe as they want? Because it is my own truth. My own truth is that I want to live in your country. My own truth is that your country is not your country. It's my own truth. It's my own country. Why is it that they have? Why is it that they have street lights? Why is it that they have street lights? Why is it that everybody is not driving anyhow they want, according to their own truth? I don't see that red light as a truth. It's not my own truth. It's the truth of the person who put it there. So let me just drive anyhow I want, because relativity of the truth. Nobody believes in that in the West. Don't let them say that to you. But they say that to people who don't think, to people who cannot challenge them. If they have relativity of truth, why do they have police? Why do they need to enforce one truth? If it's relativity of truth, everybody has their own truth. We don't need police. You don't need to stop terrorists. Why are they fighting terrorists? Because the terrorists have their own truth too. So why should you fight them? Give them the free way. Let them come and conquer your country. Let them come and rape your wife. Because you can come to you. Why do you have door in your house? Relativity of truth. You think it's your wife, but I think it's my girlfriend. Your daughter, you think it's your daughter, I think she's my sex object. Let me just rape her. Then the next neighbor will come and rape her tomorrow. I come and take your wife today, my other person will take it tomorrow. Because it's not true that it's your wife and that is your daughter. It's relativity. You think it's your daughter, I think it's just my sex toy. So all those things that those people are trying to say, it is revisionism. They are trying to reverse history. And they are trying to, it is when it comes to politics that they play this game. It's just to make their way, and it's a way of manipulating things and making their way, to things to do come their way when they don't have their way, really, according to truth. So they bend its rules. But really, on a daily basis, they don't live by that relativism of truth.
Yeah, I sort of agree. I sort of agree because I remember the first time when it was discussed. I think I was taking a lecture and it was discussed. It was in the university. I was taking a course, and they brought up that discussion on different people's truth and the need for tolerance, so tolerance of people, and not to bring people up to elitists because they described that the Western idea is an elitist kind of thought, and you want to bring everybody up to that. It's a way of maintaining society in sort of a fair, equal way. And there are people who the borders, for open borders. There are people who support the idea for us not to, keep stopping people from, allow people to come into, come in freely if they have the need to come in. There are people that actually have those ideas and support those type of ideas. Yeah, so I think I understand what you mean between that, comparing the two. And also how, so this is a case where you're saying if someone brought this idea of relativism, it is a type of conflict to you. At least you will consider that as conflict that is brought your way. If you saw it as something that was being imposed or was brought to control your own actions, is that you will use your judgment on truth to
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Another thing is that these things you stated on truth are quite difficult. Well, I don't know if they're difficult, but what I mean is that you've stated the parameter for identifying truth. That's just the beginning. That means you literally have to take each topic or each thing you hear and filter it to the point where you decide this is what. Would you say this is exactly what you are doing for everything that you propose and you put out there that people challenge? You have put them through these tests.
Yes, absolutely. All my actions and all my teachings have passed that test.
But then a lot of people might suggest that makes what you say to be sort of unemotional.
Well, if you only need to look at me to see my emotions.
Or empathic. Let's use that. You have empathy.
Well, you only need to watch my program 1 or 2 to see the empathy.
So
it's just truth. It's just truth. Forget about the standards, how to find out, how to know. This is just for people who want to understand. But if you have the Spirit of God in you, if you have conscience, that is a higher level of judgment if you follow your conscience to discover these things. Just truth. If you are a lover of truth, it's very easy to live by these things. It's not these things. It's just truth. One thing.
You just said it as a lover of truth, right? You just made that statement. And I know when I asked this first truth, you said it looks like a simple question. And I also want to say that what you've just said now as just a lover of truth might appear to be simple, but it's not very simple. Why I say that is because I feel like it's very difficult to accept what is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I feel like human nature does not want to accept something that is disadvantageous or something that is difficult. So that's why it will actually look like some of the things you said what truth is not. For example, if something works, you will go for it. And that's just human mind, I think, is designed to look for the easiest way to solve a problem because there are already too many problems out there. So what is the quickest way to do this? Just take it. Does it work? Yes. So, for example, they might be there and say, you know what? What's working? People are going overseas and making it. Okay, that's it. It's working. And they make a trip through Libya or take, one of these dangerous trips. Sometimes it costs their lives. Sometimes they do make it and they're scarred. But either way, they have just gone for it. Just, doing what they think it works.
But if you, let's just take it as an example. For example, somebody tells you you need to go abroad to make it. And one of the options is go through Libya without a passport. Go through Libya without permission. Go and deceive people at the border. Go and bribe people. And then go and risk your life to cross the Mediterranean Ocean. As can't your conscience tell you that to go to another country without visa, without a passport, bribing the borders, going through the back door, through the, illicit way, that something is wrong with that? You don't need all these criteria to find out the truth. Your conscience tells you something is wrong here.
I think that conscience is relative. Some people, I don't think everybody has the same sort of conscience.
Everybody does.
Really?
Only some people silence their conscience. Some people kill their conscience.
Okay. So if conscience is killed, that means it can't come back. It's lost.
It could come back. It will come back as its gentle reminder to let you know if you permit him or not. It will seek your permission.
The work you're trying to do in Africa, and I'll take Nigeria, for example, value system is very different there. So there are lots of things you might consider. I know you will consider conscience, like you've given this example, that a lot of people don't think like that. Like, they don't see things.
It's because they are not lovers of truth. You don't need to waste your time on those kind of people. It's just like in England, for example, I know people use somebody else's passport to go and work, or somebody else's passport to enter the country, and they are still going to church. They are Christians. Or they use another person's paper to work, to stay in the country, or they stay in the country illegally, without a visa, without permission, and they say they are Christians. They are not. They have killed their conscience. They are not human beings. They are not well. They are not okay. They are not following. They are not people of truth. They have silenced their conscience. Once you silence your conscience, you become animal. You cease to be human in some aspect. If you can silence your conscience, it means you can do everything else. You can kill somebody at the end of the day, because your conscience will not function as long as it is expedient to you what you want to do.
So you say, like, I think you've described, well, I don't think you've described, you probably describe yourself as a God general, or people describe you too as well, as a general. And in terms, someone who is a God's general, I'll use that in quotes. And a general is really in charge of war. That's the only thing he's out about. You can't have a general that is not really leading, or at least maintaining, a group of people to defend and, to be in charge of in terms of strategy. So what would you say your agenda is as a God's general, in terms of if you are a general for God? I'll use that. What is the thing you're going out for? Is it just what it means is this something to do with just truth? This truth you described, this is what I'm going out to just ensure is the thing that is everywhere. And anything that conflicts with it, you correct it or you go against that. Is that what it's about?
Yes, partly.
Okay. What's the other part?
But that is not that is a way of describing what I am for. But what I'm really for is for the earth to become a reflection of heaven, or for the earth to become reflection of the kingdom of God. An aspect of that would be what you said about truth.
See. So the reflection of heaven on earth. And that is your engagement for, in terms of what makes your engagement in conflict. So any conflict, that's really partly the guiding, what guides that, your approach.
I am pursuing the purposes of the kingdom on the earth. I am imposing the mindset of heaven, the worldview of heaven, the principles, the value system of heaven upon the earth. And that is conflict, because the earth has got its own worldview, value systems, principles. And I am coming with a conflicting or opposite worldview. So that's what is the basis of the conflict.
So is it always opposite in terms of, is it always conflicting? Because it looks like what you're...
Sometimes it's parallel.
Okay.
But it's either opposite or parallel.
The opposite of parallel?
Yes.
That's probably not parallel, meaning that they probably intersect, or they have it's not side by side.
Well, we live by side, so we don't always conflict.
Yeah.
But we live in the same world where evil lives. We live in the same world where unbelievers live. So it's either conflicting or parallel.
And your ideal is that everyone that listens to you or reads your books and does things, that they engage in the same conflicts you do. Is that your thoughts for them?
No.
Or is that
my thought is that they will understand how the world is meant to function and how they are meant to function, and they will understand at least the game plan of the universe they are living in. They will at least know what is going on around them, where they are, who they are, and what side they want to take.
So it's more to enlighten them decisions, but the enlightenment is on a truth based on the universe.
Based on the kingdom of God.
Okay. What did you mean by, you said game plan of the universe? What is a game plan? Is it like the way the world works?
Yes.
Okay. So you're really about educating people on the way things work.
Yes.
Or the way it works.
The way it works and the way God meant it to work.
So how do you come to that understanding of the way the world works? Because that's a massive, massive concept. How the whole world works. How did you develop these truths on how the world works?
How the world works is not what I develop, it's what I have to study just to be able to introduce what I'm really after. What I'm really after is how God meant it to work. And so since I started studying how God meant things to be, I began to see the conflict and the dichotomy. And in that difference and dichotomy and conflict began to inform me on how the world works, and as against how God meant it to work.
So what do you read to understand how the world works? How did you go into that study? Is
I,
it the philosophies? Were
I,
you looking at thought philosophies or psychology
I
or?
started studying God's mindset, God's worldview. Once I understand God's worldview, I began to see everything around me to be the opposite.
Okay.
So I needed to understand how things work around me so that I will be able to better communicate God's worldview, how things are supposed to work anyway.
Okay. There's another question I want to bring to, which is because earlier, closer to the start, you discussed about, you said different types of wars. And I know there's, of course, you have civil wars, you have national wars, you have in-family wars, children-parent wars. There's so many different ways to which the idea of war, which is consistent conflict, prolonged conflict, could be. But I want you to expose on the individual war, the war that takes within the individual. What is that? Because when I searched before this interview, I decided to do a search. So I put Sunday Adelaja war. And there was a video you put out on, let me see what, don't shy away from war. I think it's an old video. It wasn't a video, it was an audio, but it's like an old thing that you kind of played back. I think it was in somewhere in Lagos, possibly you'd spoken many years ago. So you just reposted it, and I saw that written out there. I also saw war on Sunday Adelaja. So some other people are actually declaring war on you too. So I saw that as well. So that was quite interesting. I thought, okay, someone has actually also set out to war you. So it looks like a very comic, interesting thing to me. That some people are set out to war against whatever you're thinking. You are setting out sort of to just do what you feel the truth that that you're convicted to go about. And that just appeared to be quite quite an interesting thing. But I want you to know about the individual war. What is the individual, the war inside? When you decide to have an idea or you have something you feel is a conviction of what you want to do, or what is that war that you face just trying to get that thing out? Because I think it's very difficult. It's easy to have the idea of what you want to do, like you have a vision of, I think I can do this. Like you gave an example of how you came to Ukraine and you had the idea you would like these people you have to have a church with people knowing the truths that you're speaking about now. But then you knew there were barriers. People will reject you. They will not accept your race. They will not accept, you recognize those things. What are the steps for individuals to overcome in terms of what is the individual war that takes place every time you have something you are set out to do, or something like you use something like a promise, or use the word destiny. So when you have a destiny or something that you feel convinced in your heart that you're meant to do or you should be able to do, what is the conflict that is engaged there to move from that stage to accomplishing it?
Number one, there will definitely be conflict between your human nature and God's nature. That's number one. Number two, that's the way. You have to go through the conflict of your flesh and your spirit. Number three, conflict will be the conflict between the new that is coming in that you are not becoming aware of to do, and the old that you used to know, the way you used to do things. Number four, there will be conflict between what is inside of you and what is outside of you. What is outside of you are the things that are confining you from outside. What is inside of you are the things that are either confining you from inside or what you are trying to bring out to the outside world. So there are so many conflicts on all these levels, and it is on all these levels, you have to overcome each one of them before you could have the harmony to be able to function in the fullness of what you need to do.
And you have this innovative hour. You encourage a lot of innovation in terms of the idea of innovative hour, coming up with ideas. Literally, I think all those things in conflict you're talking about.
Sorry?
So they involve these conflicts, these 4 points you stated in terms of to have the idea is great, but to make it to happen,
yes,
is quite a painful process, isn't it?
Yes.
To go from there to what it is.
Absolutely.
I don't know if how many people actually understand that part of it in terms of the pain, in terms of an appreciation of pain, because I don't know, the natural thing is to avoid pain, like to avoid that sort of, difficulty that is there. Do you have a way of engaging or embracing or being able to survive pain, the pain of doing it? Because I'm just thinking between your human nature and nature, your flesh and spirit, which I'll probably ask you a question on that, but conflict between the new and the old, quite a difficult thing. For example, when I read your book, The Essence and Value of Life, that book threw me off because that is one idea that just came in. And when I compare it with where I was at that point, continuing to live in the type of way I was living was untenable. You just couldn't put the two together. You had to literally change your approach. And it was quite painful because I had to literally stop everything and read that book over just to be convinced, is this exactly what is suggesting, your ambitions should be or how you should want to live? How can
that
people...
That is a continuation to that book that I just wrote.
Oh, okay.
The Value and Essence of Life is what you read. You need to read the Holistic Personality. That is the second part and the continuation.
Holistic Personality.
Yeah, it just came out.
Okay. I haven't read that.
To read that book and really understand it, I would advise you to either read it while you are fasting or while you are in solitude.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's going to be very tough for you.
Wow. Is it the difficulty, the concept?
Yes.
What's it about it? The concepts are difficult?
The very same concept like the value and essence of life. Take it to a higher level.
Okay, but a level that talks about personality.
No, a level that talks about wholeness of a personality.
Wholeness of a person.
The wholeness of a person.
Okay. It's interesting because I'd actually done, there was something about personality test. I actually did a personality test. There was he says like a psychologist who came up with this thing where you could actually do a sort of test. It will ask you a set of questions and it will give you an idea of what your personality is. So, and you could see things like conscientiousness or how effective you are in terms of being an effective person or efficiency, and then also things like how anxious you get when you're facing things, or they have just different aspects of people that they explore, and they will show you where your strength is in terms of which parts of your personality is a strength and which parts is a weakness. Are you suggesting that to be able to be that full person who is able to thrive in the world with the conflicts that you face, that you need to have a whole sort of personality, sort of balance?
Yes.
Of personality traits?
Yes. Absolutely.
Wow.
But you know what? Before you go ahead with your other questions, let me go ahead and tell people if anybody wants to call into the program, that they could actually call in by going to Facebook Messenger, Move Agents. That's the normal way we call to the program. Anybody that wants to contribute, go to Facebook Messenger, look for Move Agents, and write us a letter. Just write us to Move agent and say you want to call. Anybody that wants to call to contribute, go to Facebook Messenger, look for Move agent, and you just write to us that you want to contribute, and we'll call you back. Yes, sir. I'm listening to you. You know, if there are still some things you would like to ask, sir.
Yes, the holistic personality. I probably need to read that book to know a bit.
Yes, I think you need to read the book, and then we'll discuss
I
it.
don't, yeah, I don't. I probably needs to look in that. Now, in conflict, you could have losses.
Yes.
What could you learn from losses, or is that possible to learn from losses?
There is a lot about that I speak in that book, Holistic Personality.
Okay. Okay. Have a look at it. So losses, are they inevitable?
Yes.
Or okay. So you don't only have to accept conflict, you also have to accept the that loss is going to happen.
Not only losses, but losses and defeats. Because when you go to war, you don't just have victories. You also should be ready for defeats as well.
Okay. I think in mostly Christian environment, it's the idea that I should not suffer loss. I don't think a lot of people accept the concept of that loss is something that is a positive or is a thing.
I'm not aware of that concept.
Really?
No.
I think that's quite popular.
Huh?
It's quite popular.
I don't know those kind of Christians. Maybe they're African Christians.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we are coming from
Yeah.
different places.
Yeah. It's something that is very common there. You know, it happens like every year.
It's
People
a pseudo Christian doctrine. It's not a Christian doctrine. It's not truth. It's not according to truth. You see, that is the problem we're having. People don't base their actions and even their belief system on truth. They don't even examine it if it's true or not. They just take what is sweet to the ear and what sounds pleasing to them. So they are actually building their doctrines according to how palatable it is to them. So at the end of the day, they are simply self-serving. Religion is a self-serving thing there. It's not propelled by the truth. It's propelled by their desires, their wants.
So is this human desire, people's personal satisfaction,
Yes.
personal happiness?
Yes.
So is happiness a goal?
That is not happiness as such. That is more egocentrism and selfishness. And selfishness is the greatest evil, apart from, the same as egocentrism, the same thing. Egocentrism, selfishness is the greatest evil in the world.
Really?
Yep.
Why have you ranked it in that sort of way? Like to say the greatest evil.
Yep.
I think a lot of people will call other things like murder, killing someone as the greatest evil.
All those things are motivated by selfishness, sir.
Also, selfishness is the root of all of them. Is there harmless selfishness then?
Harmless.
Yes. Like just selfish, but you're not hurting anybody, you're just selfish. So, you're not.
Well, it could be harmless at first, but it has a tendency of growing. Every one of us is selfish. And that's what we are called to fight against. That's why Jesus said, you've got to deny yourself and carry your cross to follow him. The point of decision in life starts at the point when you decide to deny yourself, to crucify self. Carry your cross means crucify yourself. Crucify the selfishness, the egocentrism, and then turn around 180 degrees to live and follow his footsteps. which is a life of living for others and a life of sacrifice. So life, therefore, is in essence an exercise. Is in essence life is supposed to be service and stewardship. Life is supposed to be, in its essence, about service and stewardship.
What is the consequence of ignoring that truth, if it's decided to be ignored? For example,
you turn your life to an amoeba,
which is a single cell, or is it
single cell organism that lives for itself and dies without reproduction.
But then it depends on what you describe as reproduction. Because some people who are egoistic and selfish, they do produce something, like they have an effect. I don't know if this is a good example, but a lot of people will probably describe, talk about, what politics in America, and say Donald Trump is quite someone who is really about America. I don't know how true or not true that is. But that definitely reproduces something. It's not like it doesn't reproduce anything. It reproduces in other people's behavior. It reproduces in people's reality and perception. And if they feel that's okay for them, what is the impetus to want to live for service and stewardship instead?
Well, anytime you live for yourself and you practice selfishness, like you are talking about the politics of Donald Trump, selfishness in that sense will, first of all, create the illusion of success and productivity, increase and growth, but then it will be enclosed in itself, encircled by itself, and then it will be self-engulfed and self-destruct.
So it will eventually destruct itself.
Yes.
But probably long after you're gone.
Yeah, the truth is what matters, because that is the only thing that abides. All of us will lapse, but the truth will abide.
I think that sometimes, what do you do in a case where, since we now understand war as conflict, and mostly conflicts of ideas, and ideas based on truth, and ideas that maybe, other people might have based on, whatever other reason, for short term, how they feel about it, relativism, all the things you stated earlier, they might have as a reason for what they do. How do you deal with long-term impact? I've seen what you've done in terms of, for example, I'll use what you've done in taking on the African church approach. You've taken it on by confronting the ideas or the tenets of what they're saying, and saying these things are wrong, like clearly wrong, explaining and explicitly putting it out there and showing that it doesn't make sense and showing the consequence. And I think most people who've been turned around by your videos have actually seen is because they came to a sense, oh, this doesn't make sense, or oh, this is a bit wrong. It's not right. This is true. What you're saying, you're actually expressing or showing what it's doing is not necessarily the right thing. But what do you do when, sometimes something is destructive and it's a whole nationwide thing, or it's a societal thing? What could you really do about it if you find out that, oh, this is destructive, it's even affected me and will affect all the people around me? How can a layperson, just an old person, be able to take a stand to do something about that?
You need to see if you need to look into yourself and see if your heart is trying to tell you is in conflict with that. If your heart is in conflict with that, then you need to do a research about who are the other people who are also expressing disagreement with it. And then you might want to join them or or look for other partners to begin to do something about it. Or maybe you might want to be a one-man army like myself and start speaking at least your mind about the whole thing. That's why I have this book there that's called The Plague of Silence. Yeah. That is, at least start by speaking about it.
So it's important to take action.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I think there's so much so much out of this that I'll have to go back. I'll go back and have a good listen on it again, just to get a lot of things. And thank you for actually stating, particularly the truth one, because that was I wasn't expecting, when I set out the questions, I wasn't necessarily expecting, that part to come out. But it's, the way you, I thought, okay, that's quite interesting. That truth plays some foundational role in your own approach, and in the way we should actually confront or think through things, the approach we take to things we see, or the conflicts that we'll face on a day-to-day basis. And I was wondering if knowledge, there's this idea that knowledge will increase. So as days go by, you're going to have knowledge increasing. Does the concept of knowledge increasing mean that it also increases conflict? So the more we know, the more conflict comes your way. Is that a sensible thing to suggest? That more knowledge leads to more conflict in terms of, if you know more, then it creates more conflict.
It's possible, but not compulsory.
Okay, what do you mean by not compulsory or possible?
It doesn't have to be like that, even though that could happen.
So how else could it be different?
It's a possibility, but it's not a compulsory outcome.
Okay. So it doesn't really have to be as a consequence of knowledge. So you could have knowledge.
The multiplication and increase of knowledge doesn't have to lead to conflict. It could actually lead to peace.
Which is what you said before, serenity?
Yes.
Serenity, you called it. So, so I'm really seeing that this conflict thing looks more like an attitude.
Yes.
Is this more, when I link it to like an extrovert, someone who is extrovert, is it like an extrovert personality that therefore is more someone who is more combative, being an extrovert? Is it something you're suggesting that people should therefore you have to become more assertive or more of an extroverted person?
No, just being more of a truthful person. You have to be more of somebody that stands for something. But you will have to use your temperament to act out your belief. But you just have to have some belief system.
Okay. All right. And on resources, are resources limited or are resources unlimited?
Unlimited. I mean, on earth, resources are limited, but in God, they are unlimited.
Because I think that conflict comes a lot from limited resources. So competing for limited resources.
No, that is an excuse.
Oh, really? But if you said that the world has limited resources,
Yes.
so how is that an excuse?
It doesn't have to be expressed in conflict. It could be expressed in progress. Limited resources could lead to creativity. Limited resources should lead to innovation, not to conflict.
Okay. How much do you agree with this? Because I heard someone saying this idea that there's the concept of hierarchies, and people, just like a success in any organization or in any place, you will eventually have some people who are at the top of that hierarchy. And that creativity is a way for different people to have their own hierarchy or somewhere that they can be on top of or something that they could lead. How much you agree or not agree with that?
Yes, everybody is supposed to be a self-leader somewhere, and creativity gives the room for that to happen. The way I teach this is that everybody has his own land of promise, his own promised land. So when he discovers his own promised land, he becomes a leader there.
When you discover, I think when you discover, you may not necessarily lead. Because I guess if you discover it, it's just the first stage.
Yes, that's where the place of creativity comes in. If you discover it and you keep on being creative, yeah, you will be.
Can everybody be creative?
Yes, but not everybody is disciplined enough to do.
So it's about discipline.
Yeah, it's about more things than discipline, but discipline is at the basis of it.
Okay, but is creativity not a trait, like a personal trait? Isn't there a personality trait for creativity?
No.
Some people, anybody can be creative.
Yes, sir.
I'll
bet in different ways.
And you've been able to.
Creativity is in every person, and ingenuity is in every individual, because God is the creator, and He created us in His image. And if we carry His image, it means we carry a creative image. He's a creator, so we carry His nature. It means our nature is to create, just like Him. We might have discovered that. Some might have discovered that. Some might have not discovered that. But you still have some measure of it in you.
Wow. And is that something that we need to fight? Would you say that that's something you need to fight for? Like it's something that involves conflict. You have to fight for the sense of being creative, or can you opt out on being at all?
That's more of inner conflict rather than other conflicts.
Okay.
It has more to do with the four conflicts that we spoke about, 4 inner conflicts that we spoke about, personal conflicts.
Oh yes, flesh and spirit. Okay, yes, and I think this will be because I think I've explored most of the questions and the things that we've discussed. Thank you so much for really elaborating on lots of them, making them really clear. You said the conflict. There's one of the conflicts when you listed the four conflicts. You said one of it is the new and the old you. You said the new you and the old you. Is the new you, who you become when you have embedded a new idea?
Yeah, when you discover new truth or new ideas and concepts.
And then that conflicts with who you were.
Yes.
Okay. Where does that conflict take place? Is it something in
when you discover and accept this new idea?
And it's something in the mind.
It's not, rather than it is subconscious mind.
Subconscious mind. So how do we develop? I think this will be my last question. How can we develop the subconscious mind? Because I think that's very difficult to consciously, develop your subconscious. Because
Yes.
some is what acts by
It's
reflex.
another 4 hours training. Just
Yeah.
go to YouTube and look for Sunday Adelaja, conscious and subconscious mind.
Oh, you have a series on it?
Yes, consciousness and subconsciousness. Yes.
Okay. Subconscious mind. Is that relating to being in the here and now that you usually say?
Yes.
Uh,
It's related, but it's not the same.
not the same. Okay. I won't want to ask that to go into into that. I'm sure that'd be because I know you did a massive series on being in the here and now.
Yes.
And yes, so thank you for the interview today. I think I've got a lot, and I took quite a bit of notes. And you really made, at least established what conflict is. Conflict being a necessity, and it's part of where we are, what human living is. And you've also said that it's invariably it could come to you by other humans, and it could be something you have to carry out yourself. Sometimes even in self, the damage of other ideals. And you've brought that these ideals come from good, bad, which is nature good and nature of evil, which you've described evil as darkness and good as light. And that's where the word enlightenment came, and the concept that enlightenment is truth. Then we relate it to truth. It's enlightened to the truth. And then you expanded on truth and what truth was. And then you also went on to say what truth was not. And you said for truth, you said there's basis for universal truth, and you said universal, absolute, and not relative, objective, corresponding with reality, truth based on God. But it looked like there was a word you wanted to use that you said because it was this platform, you decided to keep it to that word, God. But another way you would have expressed that particular. And you then said that truth is personal. But what was the other representative or the other word you could have used instead of truth based on God? What is the other word if it was if it was more secular setting? What would you describe that one as? Rather
Creator.
than
Creator.
creator. Okay. So as the originator of the world and things we work with.
Yes.
Okay. And then you also then stated what truth is not. And you said truth is not what works. That's why cheating might work temporarily, but it's not, doesn't make it true because it is. You said not what feels good. And you said it's not what you want it to be in terms of being relativism. And you standard. He said what we perceive with what we empiricism. So what we perceive with our senses is not that. It's not the fact that we can sense it. Therefore, it is truth, and it's not what majority believe, which is quite interesting. That truth is not democracy or a vote. And this is quite something because a lot of us, at least for me, sometimes, when a lot of people think in a way, you naturally just herd mentality. You just want to move with a group. So if this is working and everybody's thinking that way, you just accept it as what it is. Or you're saying don't do that. And you said it's not an easy way to live, not a cheap way to live. But that's not truth. So truth is therefore something that will involve a bit of challenge and going out of just the comfort way out. It's not an easy way out. And there were many other things. I have so many notes here. And I really got a lot today. Probably will help our next topic because I think I set the next topics that I was thinking of. And that was a time for death. That's what I was thinking about. So looking at that concept, because I know you've written books on that. So I'll read some of your books on that and come with those topics for the next time we have an interview. So thank you very much for this interview today.
Thank you so much, Ben Okoh. Thank you so much for your witty mind and ideas. Grateful. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Well, that is Ben Okoh from England, London, England, dealing with this topic, the buying and methods of DSA.